Just do it and get it over with. Once you do this, the brain does a complete 180 degrees and tries to think of something more productive and or fun to do. Guaranteed. Unless you enjoy it, in which case, by all means continue. If you do continue, just be aware of that there's no ethical dimension to consider here. The only reasons to stop are the same reasons to stop any other addiction, including too many cheeseburgers and scratch tickets. Both habits, by the way, are far worse for you. The guilt and excessive questioning of your own enjoyment, how much, how often, and what is considered problematic or excessive is almost impossible to determine here. I suspect this is due to the ethically confused effect sexuality imposes on us all, including whole societies. Sexuality is indeed complicated, but in cases like this, the question, when it comes to one's own private sexuality, it becomes very simple, very quickly, because the entire question itself is null and void. This kind of shame is what's called a vacuum behavior. A vacuum behavior is an instinctual tendency to behave or think a certain way when the general conditions which invoke them seem to be met, but are actually instinctual misfires. To give an example, if you've ever watched your dog try to bury a toy on the carpet or hardwood, that's a vacuum behavior. With humans, it's much more complicated. With sexuality, even more so. It is extremely difficult to tell the difference between harmful and benign activities when the issue concerns ourselves alone. The reason why, I suspect, is because nature has made it rule of thumb, a deeply ingrained tendency which is oversensitive, because it is to be. Thus, these feelings and tendencies are completely irrelevant, false or illusory, and in the domain of private sexuality, and one's conduct in it, just happens to be the most susceptible to these errors due to the paradoxical nature of sexuality. It is both bragged about, and kept a secret, and has features which are both generally universal and unique to individuals. Regardless, I can assure you that this is exactly what is happening. Give the matter no further thought. The thoughts themselves are the real source of harm, the emergence of which must be shut down immediately and consciously. This is your private life, so do yourself a favor and tell your brain to fuck off. I'd go so far as to say it's none of your brain's business either. Ha ha. I find the only reason so many people tend to talk about it, is that for the longest time, we have lived in the culture of confession. It feels good to confess, it also feels good to feel like you're not alone. The purpose of this is to convince you that this is all pointless. You're not alone, and the desire to confess is a fallacious drive with biological, cultural and historical origins all irrelevant. Careless confessions on matters such as these, can needlessly open the door to further complications and grief. Confessing to the ignorant, to bigots, to hypocrites, to the perverse and sadistic, to anyone with an ideological or religious agenda, can be the real danger to your well-being. Life is full of those people, and they are amongst us, mostly by no fault of their own, but that is irrelevant. Another possibility worth considering is that someone you know might recognize you, or someone you don't know might use what you say against you, with both virtual and real-life consequences. Many people don't realize just how big the internet is, and what people are capable of, and the strange things that motivate them. The risk I'm pointing to is public humiliation. Public humiliation at any scale can, has, does and will continue to cause situations so unthinkably painful, that it becomes preferable to exist no more, to commit suicide. This is not a cowardly act, it's a reasoned and brave response to ostracized in extremis, a refusal to endure the unendurable alone, and seemingly, or actually, without hope of escape. I know for myself, any amount of shame is unbelievably painful, but public shame would be nothing less than a death sentence. Most people are very sensitive, whether they admit it or not, and stand no chance. This is a primal phenomenon with uniquely vicious effects, which can become overwhelming and unrelenting very quickly. So, if you have to confess, please practice safe confession, lol. If you are disturbed by lack of self-control, you should know, it's not a lack of self-control. You're doing what you do because that's what you want to do. If you say, I'm doing what you don't want to do, then you're simply lying to yourself. You are doing what you want to do. There's just have very few alternatives, or experiences with which to draw upon and do something else. If you say, I don't want to do this, but still do it, all it means is that it sucks slightly less than anything else you're able to think of at that time. If there's no other reason not to, then why not is a valid question. People tend to lie to themselves engaging in any domain of enjoyment. They'd rather say, I have a problem, and instead make it the world's problem. So, you're right. You do have a problem. It's called laziness, indecisiveness and dishonesty. Try this. If you tell yourself you're going to read a book, one you've wanted to read, or interests you, then your brain won't protest once you start reading like it normally would. All you have to do is decide to do what you're going to do, and then you do it. If you are on amphetamines, and you are doing something that you normally would find boring, give it, or any such activity, at least 10 minutes. First decide, then give it 10 minutes, and the final step, be amazed.